Awesome. Perfect. So today we're going to be talking about conflict and conversation. And the reason we're going to be talking about this is because it's very important because we're always going to be having some sort of conflict or conversation with people in our lives. And it doesn't have to be unhealthy conflict. In a lot of ways, conflict can be healthy. And so again, we're always going to have different things that are going to be thrown at us, different challenges and things in many different ways. This could include just life stressors such as your job, your work, school, housing, living situation, financial problems. It could be relationship problems. So people are always going to be dealing with conflict in some way. And that's why it's important to know how to manage that conflict and how to deal with it in a healthy way. Because what often happens is people think, okay, I'm just going to sweep it under the rug. I'm going to ignore these problems. Once I sweep it under the rug, it's going to go away. But the truth is that ignoring problems never makes them go away. In this picture, there's a rug that's very, very lumpy because there's been a bunch of garbage and stuff swept under it. And then on the sides, you can see that there's garbage now spilling out from underneath that carpet. And then there's lots of dirt and other things spilling out. So eventually, all that stuff was building up and the rug couldn't take it anymore. And that's like somebody's life. Once you sweep those problems away, they never truly go away. They're never truly gone. You're just ignoring those problems. They're there. You're just not looking at them or trying to face them. And so that's how those problems can then come spilling out. And it can make other problems snowball into even bigger issues. And so when somebody's facing conflict, it starts with recognition and it starts with awareness, knowing that life is always going to have conflict in some way, whether it's with other people, whether it's with yourself, whatever it might look like, but that there's a way to have healthy conflict. And there's a way to learn to navigate things so that you're prepared for future conflicts and so that you're not getting stressed out in situations and things like that. So again, it's really just trying to learn how to navigate that conflict in a way that's helpful for you. So we're going to be watching a video now.
Hi everyone, it's Matt from Greatness Every Day, and in this video we're going to talk about why and how conflict can be good. It's an interesting topic and it's probably something that many of us want to avoid, but I hope that this video will bring awareness and growth for you when it comes to conflict areas in our lives. With this channel, I hope to bring you ideas and content focused around living your greatest life, and I really believe that in order to do so, you have to figure out how to navigate conflict. Conflicts in our lives could look like the interactions between you and that neighbor you don't like, or you're trying to negotiate your salary with your employer, or even someone trying to overcome an addiction, conflict in relationships, and there are many other examples. I'm sure we all know people who are, let's say, graceful at mitigating conflict and others who seemingly attract it, but regardless, conflict is all around us. So if conflict surrounds us in our daily lives and it is crucial to living our greatest life, we have two choices. We can either choose to ignore or accept the conflict, and there will be results of choosing both. So I want to illustrate an example of conflict with a story from my childhood. And I can remember going to McDonald's when I was a kid with my family, and obviously I was excited. We ordered our food, waited for what seemed like an eternity to me at that time, grabbed it and then sat down, and then I went ahead to open my food and the order was wrong. Now to you, your answer would probably go like, okay, little Matt, just run up to the counter and ask for another one. And that really honestly makes sense. But to me, at that time, I would do anything I could to avoid conflict. In the past, if it meant that I wouldn't eat that night, I would have done it. Or sometimes the conflict was resolved by my parents taking it back, or in my darkest moments, my superhero sister, who's 4 years younger than me, would go to the counter with me. I know this is a funny example, but the lessons still hold true. If we choose to ignore conflict, I believe that we are choosing not to grow. We are handing over the responsibility of our issues to someone else, or we are choosing to avoid them, and by doing so, we aren't going to change. On the other hand, if we choose to accept conflict, and I want to be very clear here and say that you hear that I'm not saying you search out conflict, because there's a big difference between the two. But when we accept that conflict can bring with it a tremendous amount of growth, things change. There are two types of conflict that I think you need to know, so that when situations like these come up, you make the conscious choice of when to address them. The two terms are constructive and destructive conflict. Constructive conflict is said to be a win-win for whoever's involved. It involves the understanding from everyone that there is a need to address something like an error or a disagreement, and that by doing so, there will be a future benefit. So basically, you work to turn a negative situation into a positive situation and move forward. Destructive conflict is something that you don't want to be a part of, because it is typically nasty, emotional, and only focused on the individual sides winning, let's say. And destructive conflicts often end with people being frustrated, angry, and can often last much longer than the actual conflict should, and cause a lot of unnecessary damage. I'm really going to encourage you to identify situations of conflict in your life as they come up, and think about whether or not they should be addressed. Once you choose to address a conflict, do everything you can to keep it constructive, and politely excuse yourself from a destructive situation until it can be revisited constructively. When you're able to do this, it will affect the quality of your happiness, relationships, work life, and so much more. I speak honestly when I say that I usually do everything I can to avoid conflict, but over time, I have learned that in certain situations, it is necessary and it can be good. It's also been neat to see how my mindset towards something that I used to ignore and avoid as much as possible, literally, has shifted into a growth mindset and seeing the potential that can come from it. And I hope that the ideas I've shared with you in this video can help you shift your mindset as well. Do you have any stories about how conflict turned into?
I just think that that was a really good example of looking at how when you don't face that conflict, you can't grow from it. So if you aren't facing problems or situations in your life, you can't grow from those problems. So it kind of keeps you stuck at that spot or stuck at that same place. But when he was able to kind of face that conflict, he was able to grow from it and move forward.
Hi everyone, it's Matt from Greatness Every.
There we go. So next we're going to be looking at communication styles, which can help people kind of navigate conflict, because there are different ways that people communicate, and they're not necessarily always the healthiest way to communicate with someone. So the first style is looking at passive communication. And this means that somebody's kind of holding back what they want to say. They're not speaking up for their own wants or their own needs or anything like that. They're kind of just going along with things, going along with what other people want. Even if they know that that's not what they want, they still go along with those kinds of things. And so it's really important to look at whether that's your communication style. I know that sometimes there are lots of times where people have that passive communication where they just want to make the other person happy. They want to just do whatever they can to make that other person happy, but inside they're not meeting their own needs and they're not really happy about what's going on. And the next style is passive aggressive communication. So this is somebody, they're trying to get their needs met, but in an indirect way. So they're not saying to their partner, or they're not saying to their friend, or they're not saying to their family member that this is what they want. They might make a sarcastic comment, or they might say something under their breath, or in a way that, is passive aggressive. It's not directly saying, hey, this is what I need from you, or this is what I need from this situation, but it's trying to get your needs met in that indirect way. So say you wanted to really spend time with your friend on Friday night and you had plans with them, and then they tell you, oh, hey, yeah, I can't hang out anymore. I have to, I'm doing something with my other friend that night. And instead of saying, well, I really wanted to spend time with you and we were supposed to see each other, you say, oh, that's fine. I didn't want to see you, it's fine. It's whatever. I didn't want to hang out anyway. So instead of being direct and saying, hey, I really actually did want to see you, you're just passive aggressively saying something to kind of make them feel bad and question whether that you are okay with that or not. The next communication style is aggressive communication. So this is somebody demanding what they want, demanding their own needs be met, demanding their own opinion be heard in different ways. And it's denying the other person their own rights. It's denying the other person their own voice and their own way to stand up for themselves. So it's just really trying to be aggressive and dominating over the other person. And what I see a lot is that somebody will have a passive communication style where they're, kind of sweeping things under the rug, not speaking up for their own needs. And then once that keeps happening, they keep sweeping it under, or they keep bottling it up is what I hear a lot, is that people bottle it up. And then I hear that once you bottle it up, eventually somebody explodes. And that's where they go to that aggressive communication style, because they've been passive for so long where they haven't spoken up. Then they just become so frustrated that they start demanding things and not allowing the other person to speak up and have their own rights. So those are three communication styles that aren't necessarily the healthiest ones to be using with people. And then the last style I wanted to look at is assertive communication. And so assertive communication is saying what you want or saying what you need, saying what your opinion is, but in a way that treats the other person with respect. So it's not denying them their rights. It's not denying them anything. It's just saying your side of things, but then also allowing them the ability to say that as well. And so assertive communication is really what people want to try and communicate as, so that they still get their needs met, or so that they can still speak up about what they want to talk about, but so that they're not denying the other person their rights. But now we're going to look at kind of the passive aggressive communication, because I know that this one can be a little bit of a trickier one, because it can be, if you see somebody communicating aggressively, that can be kind of easy to pick out of, oh, that person's speaking really loudly, or they're speaking, in an angry tone. It can be easy to see that, or it can be easy to kind of see that more passive style where somebody's not saying anything at all and they're kind of stepping back. But it can be a little bit harder to pick out what that passive aggressive communication style is. So this is just how Robert Downey Jr. was dealing with.
What's Charlie from Chris?
With how he was kind of dealing with the situation, which the person will explain in this video.
On command, and today I want to help you deal with people in your life who are being passive aggressive. You can use this from anyone, from a friend to a coworker, someone that you've just met at a bar or a party. One simple caveat that I'll give you: this will work, but be careful when using this on people who have leverage over your life. For instance, your boss, because as you'll see, one of the steps and several of the steps are to call it out, walk away, and basically remove that person from your life. Difficult to do if it's your boss. So we'll have other strategies for dealing with conflict when it's with superiors, but this is one that you can use in many, many situations. That said, this is an interview with Robert Downey Jr. He's doing a press junket for Age of Ultron, and in this interview, the interviewer, out of left field, starts asking him questions about his drug history, his relationship with his father, stuff that is just inappropriate and directed to get a rise out of him. So I want to start where the interview is still copacetic, still cool, and you can watch it devolve in the first 15 seconds.
He's becoming a much more likable character as well, isn't he?
I suppose
a better man.
Yeah, he's becoming a better guy.
In a way that you are as well, I suppose.
Sure.
I mean, what I'd really like to ask you about a quote you gave to the New York Times. And
you see that look on his face. We often have this moment where we can tell that something is coming. There is a trap about to be sprung. Somebody's about to unleash their passive aggressiveness on us. Robert just kind of has to wait and take it because it's not aggressive, and this really is step one. What I'll say here is look at the eye contact to come. Robert continues to look right back at this guy while he can hold his gaze. The important thing here is something that you can take is that when someone is being passive aggressive with you, oftentimes they do not have the guts to be outright aggressive. They're trying to hide that. So just by looking them in the eye with a steady gaze, you can often deter that, right? They will many times backtrack on what is said. Not the case in this interview, but a great step one. Hold strong, steady eye contact. Let that person know that you know what's going on without saying a word.
I don't want to pry, so if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But what you said to the New York Times once was, it was after your incarceration, and you said you can't go from a $2,000 a night hotel suite to a penitentiary and understand it and come out a liberal.
And you see, that's just like a piercing gaze that he has. He is letting him know that he knows what's going on.
And I just wondered what you meant by that.
Well, the funny thing is, and I appreciate your point of view, things that you said 5-7 years ago or things you said in an interview that made sense to you at the time, I could pick that apart for 2 hours and then.
So interestingly enough, and this is actually what I recommend you do, you'll notice that he's answering the question at pretty much face value, which is what you'll often want to do when you sense that someone is being passive aggressive. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Many times that eye contact will deter them, they'll stop being passive aggressive, or you just might have misinterpreted. So rather than jump down someone's throat right away or constantly be creating conflict, give them for one try the benefit of the doubt. Answer their question, do what they're doing at face value.
Be no closer to the truth than I'd be giving you some half-assed answer right now. I couldn't even really tell you what a liberal is. So therein lies the answer to your question.
The statement sort of stands by itself, doesn't it? I mean, does that mean you're not, or that you came out of prison not being liberal?
Notice this here. This is what I call a warning shot. So he's given him the chance to stop going down this line. He's explained to him that he has no idea how to even begin answering this question. The guy persists. So right here, you will see he gives him a good-natured warning shot.
Are we promoting a movie? To me, the thing is that it's...
And then again, still back to good-natured.
I'm certainly not going to backpedal on anything I've said. But I wouldn't say I'm a Republican or a liberal or a Democrat.
This is important. Oftentimes when people are being passive aggressive, they are trying to box you in with some sort of question to where your options in answering suck for you either way. What Robert Downey Jr. is doing here, rather than just answering his question, is reframing it in terms that he can come out of it as the way that he wants to be perceived, right? He doesn't want to say liberal this, Republican this, Democrat that. That is not a path he wants to go down. So he takes the time to reframe the question as, you know what? I was young. I don't even know what I meant. I could guess at what I meant. Who freaking knows?
I think when I was talking to the person who was doing the interview that day, and that just happened to be my opinion. That's the nice thing, is you can have opinions and they kind of change and flow.
Yeah, well,
so he's basically discounted his question by reframing it there. I'm going to jump ahead now. This continues. Actually, let's let it ride, because it's fun to watch it just fall apart.
that's life and that's growing older, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you say we're promoting an interview, promoting the movie.
And if you want, this is just a study in what nervous body language looks like. This guy knows exactly what he's doing. Watch the jittery hands, the lack of eye contact. He's sitting far back in his chair. He just is like fidgeting all the time. This is what nervousness looks like.
I mean, obviously you're doing a promotional round of interviews, and that's why we're talking about the movie. But we also would like to talk a little bit about you, and I don't know how comfortable you are, talking about yourself at the moment.
You have as much time as anyone else will.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, then let me just ask you a few more questions, and you can answer them if you want to, and not if you don't want to. I mean,
so clearly he's getting upset. He sees he's given this guy the eye contact. He's given him the benefit of the doubt. He's even giving him a warning shot, and this guy continues. So what does he do next? He's going to call it out, and just listen for what comes after this.
Well, I think we've got 3 more minutes on our agreement.
Your foot's starting to jump a little bit. You better get to your next question.
Again, this is the first time that Robert has been anything less than good-natured. He is saying in a very clear way, you're obviously nervous. You know what you're doing. I know what's up. Get through this.
The reason I'm asking about the past is that you've talked in other interviews again about your relationship with your father.
And stuttering and stammering, the guy continues to go. So right now, if you watch his chest, Robert Downey Jr. is breathing very, very heavy. He is entering like fight or flight mode, which is common when somebody comes at you, even if it's not in a physical way. This is clearly a pointed attack. He is trying to get a rise out of him. He knows what's going on. So you see, he starts to breathe deep. He goes into fight or flight. Some people might freak out here, but notably, he doesn't.
The role of all of that in the dark periods you entered, and taking drugs and drinking and all of that. And I just wondered whether, you think you're free of all of that, or whether that's still something.
I'm sorry, I really don't. What are we doing?
And this is the most overt call out. This is step 3, 4, where you've gone through. You've given them the eye contact. You said you know what's up. You've given them the benefit of the doubt. You've done the warning shot. You've overtly called out the foot or whatever it is. He very clearly, in plain English, says, what is going on here? This is appropriate if you've given the person so many subtle warnings with the passive aggressiveness. What are you doing is a perfectly fine question in this situation. Maintain eye contact. See what the guy says.
Well, I'm just asking questions. That's all.
Right.
Guy ducks it again, goes with the passive way.
Bye.
And that's it. Walk away. This is the big thing. And this is why I said it can be tricky to do when you're with your boss or something like this. You do not need people in your life who are going to behave like this. You do not have to sit through and stomach any sort of passive aggressive attack on you. Even if it doesn't feel like an attack or look like an attack on the outside, this person, with the way that they have interacted, is trying to get a rise out of you. Do not freak out. Do not take it. Remove yourself from the situation once you've called it out. And you can look at it. He does it in a very fine, friendly, good-natured way. He doesn't walk away screaming, cursing at the guy. That is the way to handle this situation.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
Do you?
You see what? Okay, it's just getting a little dinosaur in your.
No. Look, I don't want to do that.
Thank you.
And then this guy looks at him like, what an idiot you are. And he is. So, hope that has been helpful. The steps, quick recap, are: if you sense someone is being passive aggressive, hold eye contact. Second, maintain the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's just a weird question. Maybe you're interpreting it the wrong way. Third, give them a warning shot. It can be like, I don't know why we're talking about this, but, and then you continue on. Fourth, call it out. You need to just say, what are we doing here? What are you trying to do? And then if they don't stop, remove yourself from the situation. So that's a little way to deal with passive aggressiveness in many situations of life. Hope that has been helpful. If it
Yeah, so I really liked that one as well, because it really just, I mean, I like Robert Downey Jr. personally, but then I really liked how he handled that situation where, like he said, he was giving him the benefit of the doubt. He was still holding position. He was still being respectful. So as you saw, Robert Downey Jr. was still using assertive communication where he wasn't putting up with the other person or dealing with what the other, how like rude the other interviewer was being, but he was still treating the other person with respect, but still having his voice heard at the same time. So that's that.
Was anybody else so uncomfortable watching that encounter? Like,
That was good.
oh, I was just like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with this guy? Like,
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. was giving him like all the clues that like
Literally.
move on. And he just like didn't care. Like,
He wasn't catching it. He wasn't catching it.
Didn't take the hint, did he?
No, exactly. But like I said, that just shows you how he was being super assertive. He was giving those hints. He was being respectful, but that person just wasn't picking it up and kept communicating in different ways where he would be passive aggressive, but then in other ways he would be passive, or in other ways then he would start becoming a little bit aggressive with something. But then Robert Downey Jr. just stayed assertive and then removed himself from the situation. It can be hard. It can be really hard to deal with stuff like that. But it's just kind of, that gives you an example of how people can kind of deal with things.
What's up, everybody? This is Charlie from Charisma on Command, and today,
let me just get past that one. Yaji?
I have a question for you, though.
Yeah.
If you can't make eye contact and if you can't run away from the situation, what do you do with that?
So I think if you can't make eye contact, that's fine, because there are lots of situations where people either can't or don't feel comfortable with making eye contact. And if it is a situation that you can't leave, then I think just saying that I don't want to like go forward with this conversation right now, and that I would either like to remove myself or ask the person that you like to have this conversation later, or like I said, that you just don't want to have this conversation with them now. And so the next thing that we're going to be looking at is just a little bit of a tool that people can sometimes use if they want to deal with conflict. So if there's some sort of conversation that they really want to have with somebody, but they don't necessarily know how to approach that conversation, this can be something that someone can use to do so. And so what I want to preface this with is that you don't have to remember this acronym perfectly. There are just some key pieces to it that can really help somebody kind of deal with a conversation with someone else. So the acronym is PADESI. So PADESI. And so the P stands for prepare yourself to talk without attacking. The A stands for ask if this is a good time to talk. The D stands for describe the situation as objectively as possible. The E stands for express your thoughts and feelings about the situation. The S stands for specify what you would like to have happen. And then the I is to invite the other person to respond to the conversation. So the really important pieces that I like from PADESI are the preparing yourself to talk without attacking. So this means preparing yourself before you even go into the conversation. If you know that there are a couple things that you want to get through, there are some things that you want to talk about. So you list that out, you prepare what you want to talk about, you prepare what you would like to see or what you would hope the outcome is going to be from this. And you also prepare for how the conversation could go, whether the person agrees with your side of things or whether they might say no. And that's something you have to prepare yourself for. So say you want to hang out with your friend on Friday night, you have to prepare yourself for the fact that they might say, no, I can't hang out with you Friday night. And so you have to be ready for that and know that you can't, disrespect your friend or become angry with them just because they're saying no. And so that's why I think P is one of the most important parts. And that was something I was missing a lot with when I was trying to deal with conflict. I wouldn't prepare myself before going in. I would have something a little bit in my mind of, okay, this is what I want to talk about. But then I wouldn't really prepare for, okay, well, this is what I want, but how can I get to this goal? Or what can I get my friend to help me with? And so I'd go into a conversation and then different things would kind of come up in the conversation and I hadn't prepared for that. And then it could either lead to me becoming frustrated or upset, and it could be vice versa with the person I'm communicating with. So that's why preparing yourself is really, really important. And knowing that, am I in a good headspace? Asking yourself. So just asking yourself, am I ready for this conversation? Am I feeling okay? If you have a headache and you're not feeling the greatest, that's probably not a good time for you to go and try and communicate with somebody about what you want. Or if if you don't have enough time, if you know that in 20 minutes you have to be out the door for something, it's probably not the best time for you to try and get into a long conversation with your family member or with your partner. And so that P is really, really important. The next one that I think is also really important is ask. Asking the other person if this is a good time to talk. You've had all this time to go and prepare for the conversation, but now you also need to ask them, hey, are you ready to have a conversation? If they have work, then you need to be ready for them to say, hey, no, I can't have this talk with you. It treats the other person with respect, because if somebody was coming up to you to say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you, it's nice if they ask you, hey, do you actually have the time for this? Oh, I went a little ahead there. And so the next part is describe. So just describing the situation as objectively as possible. So just trying to step back and say, hey, you noticed, hey, if say the laundry hasn't been done and you really, really wanted help from your partner or, from your family member, saying, hey, I noticed that the laundry wasn't done today. It's not you're pointing fingers and saying, hey, I noticed you hadn't done the laundry today. Or, hey, I noticed nobody's ever doing the laundry today. It's just saying, hey, I noticed the laundry wasn't done today. So it's just trying to describe that situation as objectively as possible. And then the next is E, so expressing your thoughts and feelings about the situation. So this can be important, again, if you're feeling really upset about something. Maybe your friend said something to you that was hurtful, and so you wanted to talk to them about that. And so you want to express what you feel about that situation or what was going through your head in that situation. And then the S, I also think, is one of the more important steps for Podesi, which is specifying what you would like to have happen. So just saying that if you wanted to, if the laundry hasn't been done, and so specifying that, hey, maybe we could work together to get the laundry done, but specifying what you would like to see happen, not saying, oh, I have a problem with something, but I have no solution for this, or that I don't know what I want done with this. That's why you have, preparing yourself to think about, okay, well, what did I want to see happen? And so that's why you have to specify that with the person you're communicating with. And then the last part is invite. And again, this one's a really important one as well. Inviting the other person to respond. It's not a conversation if you just speak and speak and speak at somebody and don't let them say anything back to you. That's not a conversation, that's a lecture. And so if you want to have a healthy conversation with a person, you also have to invite them to respond. And that might mean they may need time to think about it. Maybe they need to go for a day or a couple hours or something so they can think about the conversation. And you need to be respectful and give them that space and time to think about it, because again, you had that time to prepare yourself. And so I know that trying to remember all these steps of Podesi it can be really hard. And that's why I say it's more important to just remember to prepare yourself for the conversation. Just prepare yourself for going in to talk to somebody, asking that person if they have the time to even speak with you, and then talking about that situation as respectfully as possible. And then in the end, inviting that other person to respond to that conversation. Those are the important parts of it. It's not trying to remember every single one and trying to check off all of the P and the A and the D and the E. It's not about that. It's just remembering to try and have a respectful conversation with somebody. And next, we're going to be looking at I statements. And so this can be really, really important, because what often happens is, you can hear somebody say, oh, you. And I know that I'm really guilty for making you statements where I'll say, oh, you haven't done this, you haven't done the laundry, or you haven't done the dishes, you haven't done this. And that automatically makes somebody become defensive because, oh, you're pointing the finger at them. And so that makes somebody defensive, and then they're already going to be defensive coming into that conversation with you. So it's going to be really, really hard if somebody's already put up that wall and then you're trying to come in and talk to them, but that wall's been put up, so you can't even talk to them. And so that's why it's trying to just remember about saying I saw this happen, or, I was feeling this way. And so I statements have 3 parts. And so the first part is just a description of your feelings. So, like I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling upset. And then the second part is a description of the other person's behavior, or a description of the situation. So it could be that I feel hurt when we aren't able to go out to get ice cream, or I feel hurt when you say mean things to me. And then that's when that third description comes in, of looking at that effect on you or what you would like to see happen. So again, a full I statement could be, I feel angry when you ignore me. I would like it if you would try and communicate with me in the future. So it's really just trying to not place that blame on the other person, instead of saying, you haven't done this, you never talk to me anymore, you never do the dishes, or you never do laundry, you never do anything. Because once you start saying that you and pointing a finger at the other person, they're going to go on the defense and they're going to put a shield up, and it's going to be really hard for you to get through to them. And so next, we're going to be looking at active listening. Conversation, it is important to know how to respectfully communicate with a person and how to approach them in a healthy way. But a part of conversation is also listening to the other person, listening to what they have to say and what they have, what their opinions are or what their needs are. And so there are different ways that somebody can show that they're actively listening to the other person. There are verbal and nonverbal cues that somebody can give. So really making time for that conversation, setting aside time, shows the other person that you really care about this. So if you say, hey, you know what, I've set aside an hour, or I've set aside a couple hours so we can really have this conversation. It's really important for me, and I just want you to know that I have the time for you. That really shows the other person that you're actually there to listen to what they have to say. It's really important to ignore or turn off distractions. So either turning off your phone or ignoring it, turning off anything that might distract you from that conversation so that your focus is only on that. Another part of it is summarizing. So if somebody's saying something to you, summarizing back to them what they've said, or even paraphrasing back to them what they've said, so that they know you are actually listening to everything and picking up different things. And this also gives the other person an opportunity to make corrections if they said something wrong, or maybe if you have a different understanding of something, they can then list things or tell you how they actually meant something. And so that gives them that opportunity to make those corrections. Another part of it could be eye contact. And again, this could be something that's important for some people. It might not be. I know that for, in some cultures or in some religions, eye contact isn't necessarily as wanted and things like that. So again, it's just knowing who you're with and knowing how they communicate or knowing how they like someone to communicate. And looking at that body language. So not having shut off body language, not having your arms crossed over or looking the other way, or, having a really aggravated face on or something like that. Body language is really, really important for conversation. People only hear so much, or people only take in so much of what's being said, but they really take in that body language. So if they see that you're uninterested, or if they see that you're not paying attention to the conversation, they already know right off the bat that you're not listening to them and you don't care. And so active listening is really, really important. And it's also knowing yourself. If you know that you're not in the best headspace at that time, it's okay to say, hey, I can't have this conversation right now. It's better to say, I can't have this conversation right now. Can we book a different time? Than to try and go forward with that conversation, but not actually listen to what that person's saying. And so now we're going to be looking at self-care. And I wanted to look at this because conflict can take a lot out of somebody. So it's really important to care for yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, then it's really hard for you to be able to deal with future conflicts that might come up or might arise in different situations. And if you're not taking care of yourself, this can create conflict in many ways. I know there are lots of people, when they're not using self-care, they start getting really stressed out, and then they start taking that out in their work or on their friends or their family members. So self-care is a really important aspect for people to remember. So we're just going to be looking at a little bit of a video. It's just a self-care action plan. It just has some different kind of things that people can put into their lives or try and add into their lives so that they can take better care of themselves.
Hey there.
Alrighty.
Let's talk about self-care. Now, Parks and Rec, of course, is pretty great, but self-care is more than just treating yourself. Self-care is not a reward, though sometimes that can be part of it. It's a vital piece of the ongoing process of being a human. To quote the self-help classic Codependent No More, self-care is an attitude that says, I am responsible for myself. In other words, I am my responsibility, and I will honor that responsibility as I would anything else that was precious to me. So let's make an action plan for using self-care to make our lives more awesome. Step 1. Recognize that it is indeed okay to take care of yourself. Nay, it is not just okay, it is smart. As Lifehacker puts it, self-care helps prevent burnout, reduces the negative psychological and physical effects of stress, and helps you refocus on what's true and important. Like, there's an entire peer-reviewed international journal on burnout. This is like a real big difficult problem to solve. Now, this may seem counterintuitive, but it actually makes you more productive, not less, to set time aside for yourself. And regardless of your productivity levels, recognize that you are a human being, and that is enough to warrant compassion and kindness. For real. Step 2, ideally before the need strikes, research outwardly and inwardly what self-care means and what works for you. There are self-care actions that can help pretty much everyone: getting proper nutrition, some exercise, enough sleep, hydrating, and taking small breaks throughout the workday. I like to go for walks, and I like to be forced to do it by my friends or family or baby. We'll link to a list of almost 50 self-care actions down in the doobly-doo. But everyone is unique, so it's important to ask what actions make me feel better. Journaling, texting something nice to a friend, like watching videos of pug puppies, doing a bunch of push-ups, pillow fights, putting some projects on the back burner maybe. I personally am all in for the baby cuddles. I have a baby now, and I feel like I'm doing a thing that I was designed for and that I need to be doing and that I also just really like. Sometimes he's angry though and he yells at me, but most of the time I get cuddles. Now, one possible self-care action from us to you, start a digital warm and fuzzy file and fill it with compliments or kind words you've received, good memories and favorite photos. Like, I have to admit, I get lots of people saying nice things about me on the internet, and that helps get me through the day. Being able to look through this file when you're feeling down might go a long way to bringing you back up. You want this list to be both ample and flexible, and you may even want to break it into different categories. For instance, T. Michael Martin, the fellow who wrote this script, by the way, has a spreadsheet of self-care actions organized by types of negative experiences. After all, the self-care you need while you're depressed may not be the same self-care that helps when you're overwhelmed with work. Also, if other people are involved in these self-care actions, it's totally cool to let them know now that they are part of your action plan. They may not always be available, but odds are if they're a good friend, they're going to do their best to do their part. Step 3, self-care powers activate. It's best if you can recognize the warning signs that you could use some self-care before things go into the red zone. For me, by the way, it's when I notice my fingers going to websites that I didn't intend on going to. Like, just typing in reddit.com when I have a ton of work to do is a sign that I should go for maybe a little walk to recharge the batteries. If you're keeping a journal, you might notice a pattern or two in your behavior. Perhaps you'll notice a bleaker mood than normal or disturbed sleep. Either way, once the need becomes apparent, consult your list and follow through. And that is all that we have for you today. But if you have any self-care tips, please let us and other people
So again, I like that because it was just saying how self-care is a necessity. A lot of the time I hear people and they think that self-care isn't important, that, they can do without it. It's not that important. It's something that, richer, fancy people talk about. And it's not true. Everybody needs to take care of themselves. Everybody needs to have breaks to do things that they really, really like and that make them feel filled. And so that's why self-care is so important, because if you're feeling really low, if you're feeling really drained, it can be very easy for you to then get into conflict with other people, or it can be very easy for you to create worse or unhealthy conflict in a lot of ways. So that's why it's important that
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to say I really liked the part that he said about keeping like a database of like positive stuff. And I do that actually on my phone. So if I'm on like Instagram or whatever, and I see like not necessarily like a compliment towards myself, I do like that idea. I've never thought of that, but more like quotes and stuff. So if I see like a quote that I'm like, oh, I love that, or like that would really help me in this situation, like I'll screenshot it and save it on my phone. And then it's something that I can like go back to after, and like, sometimes just those little quotes or like nice things will help you through like a tough day or whatever. So idea.
No, exactly. Well, thank you everyone for watching the presentation today.
Thank you.
Here, I'll stop recording.